Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. We previously talked with Michael Port from Heroic Public Speaking in regards to when we speak, how do we make people feel? And in manufacturing, it's more about getting it done. To get to that point where you're speaking well, we don't think about this part, but often we need to write it well first. And how often do we send an email of, I need this done, this is what we need, and we just shoot that out? Or we have a team meeting and we just want to get off what we have on our chest and what everybody needs to know as quickly as possible so we can make some more parts. But I have learned so much from my friend AJ Harper. She is the master behind the scenes that really prepared us through going through public speaking on how to write. And I got so enthralled with AJ that I didn't hardly even know her. And I bought her book and read it, How to Write a Must Read. And I immediately put it on our website to share with manufacturers. And today, AJ is joining us. Welcome, AJ.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So it's really hard for me to explain to manufacturing, like how excited I am, how big of a deal you are, AJ, to me, and the fact of ghostwritten hundreds of books. And I think just normally I explain everything when I introduce a guest because I do a lot of research on you. But I just wanted to hear from your voice, the listeners understand what is ghostwriting, and just a little bit about your life.
Sure. Well, I stumbled into ghostwriting because in 2005, in 2004, I had a baby. And before that, I was a playwright and they don't make any money. And I had a brand new baby and I really wanted to be home with them and spend time with them. And I knew if I combined staying at home and writing plays, there would literally be no food in the fridge. So I decided to do some freelance writing so I could be with him. And one of the gigs I got was a book, and it was just a short book, and it was the start of it. But really quickly, I was hired to write this book that I can't talk about. I can't talk about most of them because ghostwriters sign non-disclosure agreements. So, and I honor those to this day. So one of the early books I wrote it's a kind of book called prescriptive nonfiction. And it's just a fancy way of saying books that help you make something better. Your body, your marriage, your business, your bank account, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And that person happened to be super connected in the thought leader space of self-help, personal development, professional development. So all of a sudden I had a ton of clients and I did that for 10 years. And during that time, kind of had to teach myself how to write it, which I think was an advantage because I asked a lot of questions and I came up with my own way of writing a book that's supposed to help somebody make a change. And then when I decided to retire from ghostwriting, because honestly, there was a lot of burnout and I wanted to write my own stuff, I was encouraged to teach people the same method I had created for myself. And so for the last 5 years, I've been teaching a workshop about how to write a must-read book of that kind of book. So not fiction, right? Just a really specific, because that's my area of expertise. And that is based, then that book I wrote is based on the workshop. So that was the evolution. But it honestly just started with me wanting to have time with my kid. Who's 18 now, so.
Oh, geez. And yeah, now this is involved into this whole, in manufacturing, we love systems and processes, right? We love standard work, what's repeatable. And I just never thought about that when it comes to writing.
That's what I had to do. So I had to develop systems and processes, and I created them because nobody was telling me. And it's not like you can take a class on how to write a book that's geared to help somebody make a change. It's not a college class on that. So I had to figure it out. And because I was a ghostwriter, I needed a repeatable system that worked, because sometimes I had 10 or 11 books going at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. And I find though that the systems and frameworks, repeatable processes actually help a writer because there's so much inner critic troll action happening in your brain that the systems and processes help to alleviate that because there aren't question marks about what to do next.
So let's jump into this topic then. I'm thinking like in manufacturing, there's constant leadership decisions, right? There's constant aha moments, there's lessons, and then we make some mistakes, we learn from them, we shift from them, and we talk about them. But we don't really write them down, right? We don't sit down and say, hey, I'm going to take an hour. I talked to one general manager the other day, and it's kind of like, hey, from Monday to Friday, I have no white space. Like there's no time. And I'm thinking, man, can you explain to us, what's the value of just writing down like what's gone on in your day and if you've had these lessons and ideas?
Well, you won't remember the nuances if you wait to write stuff down, and you won't remember what somebody said or how you reacted, and a lot of storytelling. So if later you need to share it with someone and you want to help them implement what you experienced, or you want to remember it for yourself, or you want to tell it to your team, part of good storytelling, which you do need in that case to help people understand, is remembering the details. And you won't remember if you don't jot it down. But you know what? Don't even have to write it. You could just record it.
Ooh.
Just do it on your phone, or there's a free app called Otter, Otter, and you just give yourself information about what you're saying and just do the bullet points. Or if you do want to write it, just do the bullet points. Do it in an app on your phone. It doesn't have to be fancy.
Yeah, that's a good idea because I started writing articles on LinkedIn when I was still running manufacturing plants. I was inspired by someone that was starting to do the same, but I really felt that it helped me. I didn't know how to do it. Like I didn't know how to start, but I just knew that I had some good stories and some good ideas. And that was kind of a way that I got started, was just start putting a couple articles out on LinkedIn. How do you see people that are in full-time roles start their writing?
Well, the main thing is consistent practice. So writing practice, a lot of people assume that means daily. And then they get overwhelmed and think that's totally impossible. A lot of people think it has to be long. I think it just has to be something you decide that you're going to stick to. So it could, for example, I write Monday through Friday. I don't write on weekends unless I have a big old deadline and then I might cram. But for the most part, it's Monday through Friday. And even if it's just 5 minutes, I'll do it. People think it has to be this big old production. It doesn't. It could be in your car. It could be waiting. I've written stuff while I'm in line. I've written stuff in waiting for the doctor, just looking for, if you have a packed schedule, which it sounds like a lot of your listeners do. Yes. I do as well. You just look for, where am I waiting? Where am I in this sort of gray zone in the car at a minimum? But you do need to plan it a little bit. So it doesn't feel right to just randomly start talking into a phone or jotting things down on an app on your phone.
Yeah.
But if you think the night before, I really want to get something down about this thing I say all the time, or about this insight I had this week. And then that way in the morning, if let's say you chose, I'm going to do 5 minutes in the morning, then you could just say, I just want to remember everything I can about that meeting or everything I said. Then that's all I'm doing. The practice of it is the main thing, because we build up to this I should be writing thing and it messes with our heads. But if you're just doing a tiny bit on a regular basis that you've decided what that regular basis is, it opens up ideas. You'll start to connect the dots between the content you have and other content. You'll start to notice things. Maybe you'll be watching a movie and you can connect it to a meeting you just had. And then all of a sudden you have a fun article or post you could do.
Nice.
But if you aren't doing that regular practice, however small, it's harder for those things to fall into place.
Yeah, I can think of some leaders that just have all these wealth of experiences, and you're right, you do start to forget them over time. And when's the best time to start this? Today, right after you listen to this episode. Just take 5 minutes out and think about what's a good moment that you had. What was that learning moment? What's something that you wanted to tell your former self? And whether you're a new leader in manufacturing, or you're someone that's been around for a while, just start it now. And it's like, I can't turn back and do more articles on what I learned 20 years ago. But I certainly can do more today. And I just hope there's a few more people that do that, because it's so powerful. Because this was another one that a friend told me, was like, I'm like, well, someone's already, written about how to approach a team member that's frustrated. And it's like, yeah, but Trevor, you haven't written it. No one's heard it in your voice. So
that's right.
Yeah,
thought, we don't all, there doesn't have to be just one person. Also, there's a lot you can do, even if you think, I don't know what I want to write about. I don't want to write about that meeting. It's one of the best things you can do is to just start talking about what bugs you. So that's the best thing, is what conventional wisdom don't you agree about? In your industry, do you disagree with? What do you wish people would understand? What do you beat your head against the wall saying all the time? What are the changes you hope you can see? What really peeves you? In there is gold that can help people understand how to do things better.
Makes me think back to the beginning of the podcast of this whole us as manufacturers just wanting to go to the next task. And when we are writing, it's usually writing out, let's say, an email that I want everybody to know this. I want everyone to know. AJ, I'll always think of you when I hear the term reader first. Explain what that means to our listeners.
Sure. So it can be applied in any type of writing for sure. But I created it because what I noticed about authors is they were focused on, what do I want to write about? What's my topic? What's my story? What matters to me? And in a book that's designed to help somebody make a change, you really need to be thinking about, what does my reader need? What do they want? Who are they? What is the change that they want in the world? And you need to shift your focus over to them, away from yourself. And the cool thing about it is then your message resonates because they feel seen, but also it helps you to keep going, because when you're focused on yourself, this is what I want to say, this is what matters to me, you're more likely to actually give up on it because you wonder if it's a good idea. But when you're writing in service to a reader, whether it's an email, a marketing campaign, or a book, you're more likely to continue because you're trying to help. It also is this really cool thing. When you are thinking about the reader first and foremost, you have the answers to all your questions. Do I need this story? Should I say it this way or that way? Should it be a formal tone or a casual tone? Should I have action steps? Should I also have graphics? The answer to all those questions is, what does my reader need, is the next question. And then you can just answer it instead of wondering if you're doing the right thing.
I wish every team leader that's kicking off their team meeting could just hear your voice today, because so many times, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay, we're going to talk about safety, quality, and productivity. And we sometimes just read that to read it. And we're not thinking that, hey, everyone's just kind of strolled in here. They're having their first coffee. They got to hit the lines. But if we could really center our feet of like, how's everyone, what do they need to hear this morning?
Yeah, if you can just think what's going on with them. The main thing is, the heart of reader first is, what does my reader want, and what did they perceive? That's the operative word. Perceive is standing in their way. Because as leaders or experts, we know it's probably not the thing that the reader thinks it is.
What do they perceive standing in their way? Because I know sometimes it's kind of like, oh man, we're not going to be able to hit target today. Like, it's hot, the lines, the buffer's not much in the lines. It's kind of like, if you're thinking that, then you can totally change your introduction. Like, hey, everyone, I know it's hot today. I can see it.
Exactly. You just nailed it. So instead of telling, because what authors make the mistake of doing often, and it's just because they don't know. It's, that's all. They speak to what they know the problem is, but then the reader thinks it's something else. So before you can actually speak to what the real issue is, you have to acknowledge what they think it is, right? So if you skip that step, then a reader feels like, I don't think this person gets it, right?
Yeah.
So if you ignore in the meeting that everyone thinks it's too hot, then they don't feel like you get them. So that's why you can acknowledge it even if you think it's not the real problem. And maybe it is the real problem, but more than likely it's not the whole picture, or it's not the real problem. You can get to that eventually. if you can just acknowledge what they're actually thinking about.
I've heard some leaders like think that they're motivational, like, okay, guys, just gotta work, we just gotta work harder today, and we gotta hit target, and we just gotta make it happen, and keep your eye on quality. It's kind of like, does that dude not recognize that it's 90 degrees in here? That we've just worked a 12-hour shift yesterday. Like, the fact that you've just totally disconnected yourself by not labeling that. Amazing.
Yeah, and what's going on with a person who worked a 12-hour shift the day before? Or say, here's an example. What if it's coming on the holidays, or people are sort of preoccupied with that sort of thing? Or what if there's been a lot of illness on your text, something's been going around and people are depleted, or something happened in the community that's upsetting people, to not acknowledge what's happening is number one part of the problem.
And the aspect that comes back to the writing part is that if we just think that we're going to rise to the occasion when that meeting kicks off and we're just going to say the right things, we're fooling ourselves. But just that power of just taking 10 minutes down and writing down, how do I want that audience to feel this morning?
Yes.
And just making a few notes and writing that down. And I've heard you use, the term understand their hearts and minds.
Yes.
Make it easier to get the information out.
Yeah. It's always about hearts and minds. When we think about who's my reader, we think about things like marketing avatars and demographics. And honestly, it's just hearts and minds. That's how we connect. It could be, you could have people in your manufacturing plant who come from all different backgrounds, but they share something in common. And you have to get at what is the thing that they all share, instead of thinking about how you can change the message for different types of people. If you can then you also have unity, where they're having a shared experience while they're listening to you or reading something that you wrote. And you just have to spend a little time. It's so worth it, just spending some time to think about what are these common denominators about hearts and minds.
That's why I'm a big fan of a script. And they're like, hey, just, we got to let everybody know that the overtime's canceled this weekend. I know it's Friday morning, but, just let the team know. And now you're sending like 25 different leaders out to send, supposed to be the same message. I was going to do quotes with my hands, but it's supposed to be the same message, but then nothing's written down. Now, what's that message going to be? But like you said, if you can kind of like, okay, let's think about their hearts and minds. They canceled their family barbecue this weekend because they were scheduled for overtime. Now we're going to tell them that, oh, by the way, it's not our fault because the customer is not running. So now there's nothing to make. But what's on their hearts and minds? How is that affecting them?
Yeah. And honestly, most of the battle is acknowledging experience. So we think, oh, well, I can't fix that. I can't change that the barbecue is canceled. But just that you would acknowledge to someone, I get it. You canceled the barbecue. I'm so sorry about that. And I know you had, that was a big sacrifice that you made. I see you. And, to acknowledge it, that's actually 90% of it. They don't necessarily need you to fix it. They just don't want you to overlook their experience. And that's what I teach in writing the book is how do you write a book that acknowledges a reader's experiences the whole way through? And you can do that in how you communicate with people that are on your team.
Yeah, because I'm even thinking like the project engineer that gets nervous sometimes going into the executive boardroom, and you got to present out on your project, whether it's ahead or behind. And I was coaching a supervisor that was in a pretty important meeting, and he talked about like the meeting didn't go quite well. and then he told me some of the comments that he made, and I'm like, well, what was your plan going into the meeting? Like, how did you want that person to feel? And what preparation did you do, like even kind of writing out those thoughts so you could stay grounded? Because sometimes we get emotional and we may say things, but if we kind of have a script, this is why I love the word script, right? And we have used it before, and darn, it works when we have something written down that we can kind of follow, and it kind of keeps our emotions in check and keeps us grounded.
Yeah, and a script doesn't have to be exactly word for word. It could be, here's a script you could modify slightly to let people put their own spin on it, as long as these key points remain. It could also be bullet points if you don't feel comfortable writing actual dialogue. That's cool. But to just, let people, I think that also if you're doing bullet points, the order of things is important, to
Mm.
think through when you say different things versus to just here try to say all these things.
Yeah.
Um, so, listen, anytime a person feels seen, they're listening and they feel connected to you and they feel important. And most of the time when people stop performing well or say, in my case, give up on a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And decide they're not going to finish it, it's because they don't feel seen. It's really just the main thing you need to do.
Make them feel seen. That ties right into mindfulness manufacturing, right? The whole concept of connection, being seen, heard, and valued. And when we
Mm-hmm.
put a little bit of time into that, it can shift. It can shift how our audience feels.
Yes.
And that's really where we want to kind of leave our listeners with, in the fact of like that whole reader first. And another line I like of yours is every page you write is for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yep.
basically follows the same concept.
Yeah, well, if you're thinking about your own objective, it's not that your own objective doesn't matter. It's just you're actually going to, ironically, get that objective if you focus on the person instead.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually even more effective when you set your own objective aside and you're just focused entirely on the person that you're speaking to or writing to.
So if you got the ear of the manufacturing leaders now, and I would love to see our industry needs some work, right? To be more mindful. This is why we have the podcast. And I would just love to see people take a little bit more white space and just write a little bit more, because there's so many good ideas that seem to be, they get implemented, then they get lost because we don't write them down. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
how could you leave our listeners with what would be your advice for our community to start writing more?
Well, I talked earlier about a practice, but the main thing is do not expect that you have to be great at it. You just need to get the ideas down. There are ghostwriters, there are editors, there are people who can polish up your stuff. I think that gets in the way. The thinking that I don't know if this is good, who's going to care, who wants this.
Mm-hmm.
That voice is really strong and it prevents us from and sometimes that voice is sneaky and tells you don't have time. It's disguised that what's really happening is you don't think people will care or that you won't be good at it. And the thing is, just get the idea down. You can make it sound good later. That doesn't even matter. That's what I would say. I think that's the real barrier. Is we tell ourselves we don't have time, but that's really just an excuse that makes sense to us. What's really happening is we think maybe it's not valuable to other people. Because if you really thought it was valuable, you would make time.
AJ, I appreciate the coaching that you've given me and helping develop my own writing skill through HBS. And it's that whole moments of, hey, I'm talking about connection. We need to talk more, be more curious. And sometimes it's kind of like, well, that just sounds boring and normal. And I just need that reminder of, it's not about what I'm feeling, whether it's needed or not. It's like, does someone need to hear that? Yes, they need to hear that.
Well, you do know it's needed because you're passionate about it and you've seen the results, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt the results because of just that time in my career where it was just, leave your emotions at the door. You just got work to do. We don't need to have a lot of dialogue on it. I don't need to script it out because I can just say what's on my mind. And that was it. It's because I can just say what's on my mind. I can improv it because it's about me. It's about me and where I want my career to go. And that was probably the lowest part of my career, even though I thought it was the highest, because I was like driving. It was about Trevor. It was about making a name for myself. And as soon as I could start shifting of like, okay, no, it's not about me. And whether it's your writing, your speaking, and your heart, it's you got to shift your heart.
I fully agree.
Oh, AJ, so appreciate you coming on. So, how to write a must read. I have recommended this book to so many people. It has changed the way that I really think about so much of my own personal writing. I've never read anything in my life or heard of something that was more complete and whole and full of just giving, of setting yourself up for success, whether it's your first time writing an article on LinkedIn or it's writing that must read book that you've always wanted to write. And you've just, put that out there. And this is the crazy part. It's like, well, she wouldn't give all her, tips and stuff in a book. And it's like, yeah, she does. because there's not many people that have the discipline to follow all that way through, but there's just so much of it that makes sense. So what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, AJ, and follow it? And we know that I've made a video and a great book report on my website, but they want to go directly to you. What's the best way to do that?
I'm just at ajharper.com. It's on that website. You can sign up for my mailing list if you like. I give a free newsletter with lots of writing tips that can be applied to all sorts of things. And that's the best way, just to get on that list.
Right on. Well, we are blessed to have you in the manufacturing community, AJ, and thanks for coming on and everything that you do.
Thank you for having me.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.